This is Dad.
And this is Nat.
Welcome to the DadnNat podcast,
where we talk to people from the unified generation
and promote the inclusion revolution. Ben Mattlin is a journalist and the author of Disability Pride, a book that explores what's taken place in the U.S. since the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, more commonly known as the ADA. The first Disability Pride Day was held in 1990, the same year as the signing of the ADA. Ben decided to explore the changes taking place in a thriving disability culture that is normalizing disability. He also looks at problems that still exist in stigma, ableism, and the erasures of voices and visibility within the movement, particularly for people of color and for the LGBTQIA communities. Let's welcome Ben Mattlin to our podcast.
Ben, first I'm honored to meet you and author like you.
So I guess we'll start with some of the getting to know you questions, and these are these very random questions that we ask, different questions for each guest. But I asked Natalie to start with the question series. So Nat, do you want to kick us off with that?
Okay, Ben. So what's something that's not illegal that you would feel that you got away with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have gotten away with. I don't know. Surviving. Certainly when I was growing up, and there were no access codes or requirements. Everything I did was like something I got away with, as far as I know, I was the only kid in a wheelchair in the New York private schools, that kind of stuff. We, it was always a fight to get in the door, and I didn't maybe realize that as a kid, but for instance, people have asked me about my marriage, and I'm like, sometimes I don't understand why they ask, because it just never occurred to me that I wouldn't get married, that I wouldn't find a girlfriend and live a sort of normal life. It surprised a lot of people, apparently. Didn't surprise me. But, so sometimes, sometimes just hanging in there is a revolutionary act in itself.
Yeah.
At least that's what it feels like.
That's a really good answer. I know we'll talk a little bit about the school scenario and some of the I think attitudes that you adopted as a younger person later, but I really like that answer. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a good question. Provocative.
Okay, Nat, next question.
Yeah. This is just a little fun one. What do you like to wear when you want to feel good?
Yeah, probably nothing. I mean, I do sleep nude, and yeah.
That's very freeing. I put this in because you mentioned in your first interview that you had to change out of jeans and dress up, and that at the time,
yes,
yeah. So I was just thinking about like your normal mode at home and how that might evoke a response. So, but Elizabeth, I think we're going to stick with that. That's.
I mean, yeah, most days I'm just in jeans and a I don't know, sweater or a shirt. But honestly, clothing is an issue for a lot of disabled folks. And I could probably go on about that. I wear a brace, abdominal support belt. Helps support my diaphragm, helps me breathe. It gets a little uncomfortable. So at night when I get to take it off,
it's very freeing at that
very relaxing. Yeah.
That definitely makes sense. Awesome.
Okay, so name something significant that happened to you last week.
Last week, I'm always writing. I'm working full time for a financial magazine and website, and sometimes I get a little bored with the day to day, and then one of my articles appears. And it's like really gratifying. I don't remember what I had last week. I think I had a couple of good ones. That's always nice, and they they kind of judge them, on the number of clicks of people clicking on it. And I had a pretty good click rate last week, so I was pleased about that.
You're proud of, and that is definitely significant. That's a great answer. Nat and I went up to Spokane, Washington, to see a Natalie Merchant concert. It was kind of the week last week, so we drove about 12 hours each way, and that was
my
own thing. But it was fun though. Natalie, this Natalie got to hug Natalie Merchant at the end of the concert, which was our hurrah moment. So that was
wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
Okay, so speaking of bands.
So favorite band and why is it Elvis Costello?
Yeah.
I hope I said the last one.
So I love seeing this little bit about you, and I don't know if you'll jog your memory about what I'm referencing, but
I know what you mean.
Okay, yeah.
No, that was the first date I had with my wife was a Elvis Costello concert in New York. Of course, things have changed a bit since then.
Sure.
No, I'm probably, if I had to name one band, it would have to be the Beatles.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Not a very original answer, but I keep going back to their music and getting a thrill out of it. So I guess it has to be my all-time favorite. Yeah.
All right, I love that.
Beatles are a great band too.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, what's your favorite hashtag on social media right now, Ben?
And this was something I just wanted to mention again in your book. There were a lot of hashtag references to social media when you were writing, and I was really trying to pay attention to all of them, but I really was kind of curious if there is like the current campaign or is there a like a statement that you kind of look for in social media that you follow?
Well, there do seem to be a few that I keep, I don't know, bumping into, like Flip the Vote, which I guess, around election time gets bigger and bigger. There was a high-risk COVID hashtag that I relate to, people like me who are sort of have to be extra cautious. There's what's that? There's one I've seen lately for the disability community. It's just disco, like a disco, but disability community, DISCO.
Oh,
I get a kick out of that.
That's actually really cool. I love that. I love that. I was curious about that, but I will say that on my social media, I started following a lot of different voices as a result of reading. So that was good. That was good. Yeah. So I guess we can kind of break into the general discussion then. I'll start by talking a little bit about your book, Disability Pride. This is your third book that you've written, and it actually follows what I kind of feel like it was a sequential series of writing, because you started with a book about yourself, the miracle boy grows up, and that book was really focused on personal story, but it was also kind of dealing with that moniker that you had, miracle boy, and how you wanted to, I think, move away or move out of it in the book. And but the second book was more focused on relationships. And I love that you went here. I think that this is probably a topic that at least within the disabled community should probably be addressed a lot more. The book was In Sickness and Health, and that book was starting to move away from self and into relationships. But then Disability Pride, you say it wasn't about you, and so this is sort of the moving, beyond self and relationships. It's looking at social. Did you ever think about that progression, or was this just sort of a natural circumstance of events that kind of led you to reading or to writing that way with the three books that you have?
I like your question, because well, I like your careful reading of my stuff. I don't know. The first book, I guess, like a lot of first books, was basically autobiographical, and I'm hoping we can finally get a paperback of it out with some updates. It's got some bad language and a couple of errors. I hope to correct. And I heard from readers afterward that I didn't go into enough depth about my marriage. They wanted kind of a sequel. And I thought, I can't write about my marriage. I'm living it every day. I've got no distance from it or whatever, no perspective, But it does come up a lot when you talk to disabled folks. I mean, access and employment and justice, they're all important. But people want to hook up. People are lonely. They feel socially isolated and all that. And that sometimes it's like number one on people's minds, right. It seems like. And I thought, well, the subject is worth exploring. There are a lot of misunderstandings or assumptions people make. So I will examine my relationship, but I really want to look at other people, maybe in similar but different situations. Yeah, take it a bit out of myself. If I had it to do over again, I might actually take myself out a little more. I really let the other people speak more without my commenting on them. I don't know. I think you made some important points. And then I thought, now what do I do? And then, as I mentioned in the new book, I began seeing these things, visibly disabled fashion models and performers and winning awards, but 5 years ago, I guess. And I thought, wow, the world has changed. I realized a generation had come of age after the ADA, with a presumption of rights that my generation did not have. And what have they done with it? They've done things that, was not in the ADA, that you got to have fashion models with disability. I mean, these things were taken farther than I'd ever imagined. So I I wanted to write about how, well, really two things, how some disabled folks were able to be so publicly disabled. And I really wondered if I had that kind of self-confidence. I mean, I'm not hiding, but I'm not, I'm not on stage.
I think I understand. Melissa Blake on Instagram, she's a disability activist, but she started posting selfies of herself over a year, controlling that took place. And I honestly, I think that this is part of the that moment of disability pride showing its face, is that we don't no one wants to hide. They want to be their authentic selves, and they want to be accepted. And I think Melissa's decision to push back against some of the trolling that she saw online was very much about seeing the real person. And honestly, we Natalie and I both follow Melissa, and
I'm a fan of hers too.
Yeah, she's amazing, a great writer. And what does she call herself? It's not saucy. She has a term that she uses for, and but she's she's really good. But to me, I think that's part of what I'm seeing is social and cultural constructs changing to grow more acceptance that there isn't really a norm, that
right,
everybody, and we have to learn to see and appreciate those differences, but maybe even get like seriously beyond the sort of consumer skin deep
right
vision of who people are.
I figured there were two parts of it. One, the people themselves having the, I don't know, courage to be out there, but also that they were allowed to be there. I mean, the gatekeepers of media were recognizing that there is a market for this stuff that really wasn't out there. Certainly not when I first tried to publish books. Couldn't get a contract, people thought it was very literature, very depressing. So I thought things have changed. And I really wanted this book to be a little more personal. But my publisher nixed that. He was like, no, be a journalist this time. Let the people, communicate to you and make it broader than just beauty. Make it the whole, the whole generation, the whole movement and all of its facets. And at first I thought, I can't do that. That's huge. That's complicated. And I can't, it's not really appropriate for me to try and represent people with different kinds of disabilities and different kinds of situations, economic or whatever. But she kept insisting, my editor, be a journalist. I mean, you don't have to be totally objective. As a disabled person, I'll have insights and perspective, but try to keep myself out of it, except in the intro and the conclusion. So that's what I try to do. It's probably better for that. I mean, it's better for me to use this opportunity to highlight other folks and give them space to express themselves.
Well, I love the breadth of topics that you had in the book, and I love that you were also very good about making the indices that we could reference and explore. So those were my personal observations that it certainly did cover a lot of topics, but I thought again it was organized really, really well. So kudos to you and to your editor for
Thank you.
That's good. So the next question, really, I guess I'm just getting at the heart of the name of the book. There's an essay that you mentioned on page 36 by Eli Clare that was called "Shame and Pride," and to me this was really interesting because the idea of shame and the idea of pride and how much related those ideas are, and particularly about the disempowerment or the empowerment of a community really means a lot. And I like the quote that you chose, that pride is sometimes used by marginalized communities as an act of resistance, and that just really rang true to me. But I just wanted to ask. I mean, this is kind of the maybe the heart of what you were writing about. But I'm kind of curious. What in choosing the name Disability Pride. I mean, what does it mean to you to have pride, and why is that so important?
Yeah.
Big question.
That's a good question. The title was not the original title, but it seemed to fit because it was an issue that just kept coming up as I talked to people. And it kind of fit my original concept of how people had come to be unashamed. So yeah, pride, is partly self-esteem, not being embarrassed, ashamed, not trying to hide or minimize your limitations, not trying to cover them up in any way, which is something I did when I was younger. Well, I thought I could get away with not being realistic about quite how obvious my disability is. It's more than that. I think you feel pride when you understand the cultural context, when you connect with your community and see all that your community does, is doing and has done historically. And also when you become sort of educated about the past, about what disabled people have faced and how they've coped with those restrictions. You almost can't help feeling proud to be a member of that group.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, I will say that understanding like intrinsically identifying with the value of self is really important, and I think that it's something that I mean personally, I think it's very difficult for some people to see, you know, how much they matter or how they matter, but moving from, you know, existing to sort of, you know, celebrating and defending who you are is there's a leap for folks, and I think particularly with some of the writings that you had in the early part of the book about cultural changes in the United States, where, you know, we were moving away from institutions, that we were starting to see community-based support, and then sort of a return to the family, or independent living, and how looking at the last, you know, 150 years and what's happened, and recognizing how much change has come about for people with disability is it's progress. I don't think it's enough, but it's progress.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
The next question, this one, I tried to frame it with some recognition that back in 1972, in Berkeley, California, there was a group that actually pushed for the first, or what became the first curb ramp in 1972, and this was a momentous change back then, and we're just past 50 years. You know, so 2022 would have been the 50th anniversary of having a curb ramp on a sidewalk. And what I was thinking about for this is that, you know, for the majority of people who've grown up in, you know, the 90s and sort of moving forward, this is not something that they see as just a matter of fact, you know, that curb ramps exist. They understand what their use is for. You know, it's not just a disability issue. It's about, you know, commute and access for a wide number of groups. And but I don't think that, you know, back in 1972 there were a lot of people thinking about improving how people get up and down from a sidewalk to a street. And it just made me realize that one of the things that we're kind of fighting against is this idea of the ableist society, that accessibility has to be challenged, and there has to be a recognition about the need for a change. And I know this is another open-ended question, but I'm just curious, you know, when we think about like being inclusive, and now I'm kind of talking at like a cultural level, you know, it might be like for city planning or residential planning, but how is lived experience helping to shape the change that we need to see, and is there something that we're not seeing today that we should be acting on?
Hmm. Well, it's an interesting question. I know, for instance, there has been some movement to make environments more accessible for autistic people, but that tends to get overlooked. And yeah, besides, ramps and braille signs, there are whole issues around societal inclusion. I think it's one reason why the internet has been so great for so many disabled folks. It's pretty much equal opportunity, equal access with the right technology, if you can get the right technology. Actually, that's been another kind of wave of ensuring access to, or I should say, availability of accessible technology. So there are many, I think, many aspects of accessibility and inclusion in society that you almost have these different pockets, different groups of people thinking about buildings and goodness, air quality. I mean, people say environmental justice is disability justice. And it's true, for people like me with breathing issues. Bad air can be a lot harder for some of us than for others. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm answering your question very well. There's a lot of stuff.
It's actually that was a really good answer. I like the examples that you brought up. I especially love the air quality issue being one that's really critical. I think part of this is just really, starting to think about looking through the eyes of others and seeing what are the accessibility issues today. You mentioned, making spaces more inviting to people who are on the spectrum. That's another really, really good example. So there's,
and it's I think the solution, plural solutions, part has to do with empathy, but also to get more, actual disabled people in jobs, places of authority, where they can be the ones saying what needs fixing, what's wrong, what's right, and what needs to be tweaked. Not have others deciding for us. That would be a good step.
Let's we'll actually come back to the jobs bit. We have another book reference, page 86 of your book. There's a statement there. It's not enough to pass legislation or to celebrate differences. And what we need is a radical action that dismantles mass systems of oppression. I really love that, the let's take the man down. But the thought that I had on this one is that systems of oppression is kind of a big term, and there are implicit and explicit systems that I think are being referenced, and some of the implicit issues that we have to deal with are ignorance, or in some cases bias, and certainly there's a lot of conversation about marginalization. And I think this is more a question, and Natalie, I want you to talk about this too. What is the importance of connection and awareness and empathy? You mentioned empathy just a moment ago. How are those important? And Nat, do you want to maybe start by talking a little bit about building understanding and building awareness? That's something that you do a lot.
Well, it's really important, especially for those who have disabilities, because, well, those who have disabilities, and well, those who have physical disabilities and IDD, sometimes they can get really lonely, um, and they might not have like friends, or might not have somebody to talk to. And well, it's just really important that they build friendships. They can build connections, and they have someone to talk to. And with that, I kind of saw that with Best Buddies too, because
Mhm.
he helped. Because with Best Buddies, they help create one-on-one friendships with those that have a disability and those that don't have a disability. And also with Special Olympics, they have something called Unified Sports. And with Unified Sports, they create basically teams that basically means that it's teams that are made up with people that have and don't have disabilities. And with that, they create friendships, they create memories, they create lot of they create basically inclusion.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a good answer, but
Well,
I get you.
so you talked a little bit about a marginalization and finding connection, and this is, I think, one of the most important things that social media helps with, but the idea of finding your community. We used to talk a lot about that. Do you remember AOL and the AOL communities
Mhm.
at first?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It was this idea that you would find people online and that you could, find people of similar interests, just go crazy with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, either way it goes back to your question about pride.
Yeah,
The internet has helped a lot of people, disabled people, well, and non-disabled, but it's helped a lot of disabled people realize that they're not alone.
yeah.
And I think it's contributed a great deal to fostering an awareness, yeah, of issues, but of shared experience, which helps people build pride, I think.
I love that.
so then on page 75, there's a ref book reference that says, I I don't just want us to get a seat at someone else's table. I want us to be able to build something more magnificent than a table together with our accomplice. This
Listen,
question is, but this is a resident
reminiscent. Yeah,
yeah, resident in
it's okay.
of Special Olympics CEO Tim Shriver's quote about what inclusion means. Me and my unified partner Katie Hutt interviewed him in Abu Dhabi when we were chosen for the Special Olympic World Games in Abu Dhabi, and he actually said that what inclusion means to him is that everyone deserves a seat at the table.
Mm.
So what should inclusion look like?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So Nat, do you want to tell him what you said, what your answer to Tim was about that? Because he asked you back.
Well, my question was that everyone deserves to do what they love. Because
Mhm.
they truly do. Because I mean, like, for example, in your book, look at like Ali Stroker. She is doing what she loves, and that is doing Broadway shows and doing well, she got to do her own Hallmark movie
Right.
as
Right.
well. So, and she's an author too of her own book. So
Mhm.
that's just a few examples of that, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but I want to hear more about Abu Dhabi. I've always wondered about that, but maybe later. I can't really speak to what what was meant about the something more magnificent than a table, but I think I get the idea.
Yeah.
The first wave of disability activism, at least in the modern, the last 50 years, was all about rights, civil rights.
Yeah.
And the new generation is kind of going beyond that, about really changing. There are things we need that go beyond rights.
Yeah.
And there are some who say, the whole sort of capitalist system of, competing, one person moves ahead of another, can be ableist, because, you're not saying that someone is entitled to all society has to offer just by virtue of being a human being. You're saying you have to achieve certain things and do more and compete. And as somebody said to me, this idea of go, 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 go all the time, that's not really accessible for a lot of disabled folks.
It's not a very human way to live either.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good observation, and I think one that's reflected in more discussion about opportunity and the idea about people having the same opportunity for being able to move forward. It's not necessarily equality so much as it is just giving some equal footing to everybody, regardless of who they are or what their background is.
I think it's a good idea to try to think bigger about, reshaping everything. It's a little daunting. It's can't reshape everything, but it's a good challenge, I think, to reinvent the table or whatever. I don't know.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll come back to this at the end. We're gonna ask you our regular question, but I'm gonna save that till the end of the interview. Let's move a little bit into school and work. Just recognizing that Ben, you and I are what I don't want to say later stages, but we're a little older, right? I'm
fair enough.
6, yeah, and one of the observations is that a lot has happened since we were both born. That Natalie is kind of a recipient of, and we had. If I go back as far as the Civil Rights Act, that really was sort of the start of change. You mentioned in the book that civil rights was sort of essential for disability rights to have been able to move forward. So I want to mention that. We had the Rehabilitation Act in 1973. There was
50th anniversary.
Yeah. There was the IDEA, which was established in 1975. We have the National Council on Disability that was established in 1978. Ben, you didn't graduate until 1980, so all of those things had occurred while you were well, not all. The latter had occurred while you were actively in school. And then in 1988, so 8 years after you graduated, we had the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, passed. So
that was 1990. Just
or 1990. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah.
It was introduced in '88, and it took 12
right
or years to move forward. So really, I know that you've talked a little bit about this in just past interviews, but for where you were in New York at the time, it really wasn't typical that somebody in a wheelchair would be going to a public, well, or to a regular school.
Mm-hmm.
And how matter of fact did you take that when it happened? And I'm just curious. I mean, how was your experience as a young person? You mentioned the doors of the school as an example, or steps in the school. But culturally, did you have to earn your spot as a peer student? Was it assimilate? How was it for you in those years?
Yeah, it's a good question. Back then, I mean, the horse and buggy was not very wheelchair accessible. No, I'm kidding. I mean, my parents did the hard work.
So they insisted that you go
to
school, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
I was fortunate, I had parents who had the emotional and financial wherewithal to provide whatever I needed, and they really had to go on their own. There were no groups or political awareness other than medically. But, I had an older brother who was not disabled, and he went to a private school in New York, because even then, I guess, maybe even more so then, the public schools were not so great, and I guess the private schools were not as expensive as they are now. I don't know how they afforded it. Anyway, so they wanted me to have the same opportunities he had. But the schools he went to refused to take me. So I know my parents had to, I don't know, cajole and beg and try to find some place that would take me. Yeah, I was, the only disabled kid, as far as I know, in the schools I went to. But it's interesting. I found my first grade teacher was getting a PhD in education, and there was this new concept then called mainstreaming.
Yes.
Getting, disabled kids out of special ed or segregated whatever and into regular classrooms. And she wrote her dissertation about me. That gave me a kind of a perspective on what was going on. And I guess she did do some class exercises.
Okay.
I don't really remember this, but like having the kids come up and touch my wheelchair so they wouldn't be afraid of it or whatever. I probably liked all the attention. I don't really remember, but I feel like I always had friends, and I had my little group, my gang.
Ben, if I can share,
yeah,
an experience. So with Natalie, when she was 8 months old, she started having seizures, and so those were pretty regular all the way up until about age 11. And when she first started kindergarten, one of the suggestions from another parent had been to essentially write a kind of a letter of introduction and introduce Natalie to her class, because especially very young kids, they ask a lot of questions, and sometimes they can be pretty harsh, not intentionally, but we wanted to make sure that her class understood that Natalie had seizures occasionally, and this is what to do. And there was kind of a little introduction on what cerebral palsy was, but it was sort of, at the kids level. And it actually helped a lot because it was a mainstream class, and she ended up having a lot of people who kind of, watched out for her because, every day she might have 2 or 3 seizures. So it was active enough that it was noticeable by the rest of the class. But over the years, that letter changed through her elementary grades. But as she changed schools, and there were 3 major changes in elementary school for her. There were new teachers and new classes, but one of the things that we found is that engaging early and getting sort of in front of the questions and working with the teachers really helped a lot. And there were cluster programs that were introduced for Natalie to join, but there was a huge effort to mainstream as much as possible, and that was something that Ange and I also heavily wanted to see. I think the observation is that this is very much still an issue in our modern school system. And the one thing that I will say is that as early as possible, kind of working with the classrooms to try to integrate as much as possible, but also to educate and to make better awareness, for in this story, it would be Natalie's seizures and knowing what to do, but that has helped a lot, and I think that Natalie actually has developed a lot of friendships that are lasting for having been introduced at such an early age, and people recognizing her as a peer then, and carrying that up through adulthood.
Right, that's good. I mean, it's good for the disabled kids, and it's good for their non-disabled classmates.
Yeah. But I think you did your own forging back in the day. I really enjoyed some of the stories that you've shared previously. So speaking of, you did talk about at least one experience about being bullied, and one of the things that I really liked hearing was that you said that from an early age your mother had shaped your personal views about normalcy, that you just had to kind of figure it out and get along. I know that those weren't her words, but with your later years in school, did you see a change in the way you were treated as a student or as a peer in classes, and were there any benefits that you could tangibly see from the introduction of legislation like 504 and IDEA?
Not consciously. I mean, I was in the same school from 1st to 8th grade, so I got people knew me and I knew them. Yeah. I switched for high school, and had to kind of begin again. I guess the IDEA was probably still called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act in those days. Yeah. Anyway, it was in place, but I don't think it really impacted me. But when I started college in 1980, that's when the Section 504 of the Rehab Act came into effect. And, looking at colleges, it was, there were some that didn't know how they were going to respond to that rule or what they would do with a student like me. But others, I think, were bending over backward to accommodate. And as I tell in my book, there was one college that told me I was accepted before I'd even applied. I guess it was affirmative action. And you know, I think I felt like a VIP, you know. I wasn't really offended by that. But there's still a long way to go. And I didn't see a lot of, well, there were a few other disabled kids in my college class, not wheelchair users, I don't think. But anyway, there were a few of us, and we had a very small student group of, you know, disabled students. But no, it was really, at least in my circles, there wasn't, or maybe I wasn't open to the idea. You know, I was kind of apolitical. I talk about pride. I did not want to associate. I did not want to connect, you know, be part of them, that group of disabled people, which is really, you know, a terrible attitude.
So Ben, I actually think it's probably more prevalent than people think.
I think it is. I think it is.
It's honest what you're saying, and it's not a.
It was really only later when I would meet other disabled folks who said the same thing. You know, who were like, "Yeah, we don't want to be like that," or we don't. I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm not." You know, I felt like I found a group of disabled people who thought about it the way I did. And you don't want to be a charity recipient.
Right.
I mean, you remember the MDA telethons, Jerry's Kids, and all that pity stuff. I was part of that. So naturally, I didn't want to identify as one of them, because one of them is some pitiful kid who's going to die before the age of 10. I mean, it was an awful image, and I had to come to know, I had to see things differently.
Yeah.
Come to know disabled people with a different vision.
Yeah. That's really important. And it wasn't so much the community as it was the stigma and the culture at the time. It sounds like, and I will say that was one of the things where, you know, you're looking at more independence. You don't want to be seen as a charity. You know, nobody wants the sympathy, you know, or to be told that they're special, or, you know, just some of the things that people say that they think are being well-intentioned, but are really just very upsetting.
Yes.
To hear. I think that's why it makes sense to me, is that it's more about being perceived about your independence and your ability, and not looked at just because, you know, you're in a wheelchair, or because you have a label, or, you know, whatever that happens to be. It's, I think, something that we still go through. You know, I mean, there are unfortunately a lot of stereotypes. You know, people work well within them because they're easy. They don't have to think about it. But you know, in reality, you know, that's one of the challenges that we have as a society, is breaking down stereotypes and moving away from them. Yeah, this was good. Natalie, did you want to cover any of the questions about like movies and social media, some of the stuff that we had about identity? Is that okay?
The book reference, page 37, authentic disabled role models can be critical for helping disabled kids and newly disabled adults build pride. This is maybe one place where social media, film, and writing have more influence. Music, sports, and fashion probably play into this as well. What ways are there more directly engage as role models? Do you have role models that you follow, do you consider yourself a role model then?
Oh my, well, I
You're an
never,
author after all.
I never intended to be a role model. I guess it happens. I'm just doing my thing, living my life, and
Sometimes that's the best representation, though. So,
perhaps.
do you have anybody that you consider a role model or somebody that you look up to that you are a follower of?
I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm a little afraid to name names because I'll leave somebody out. There are a lot of disabled folks who, you know, we hate to be called inspirational, but there are a lot of other disabled folks who do inspire me. The real, activists who have these visions and these ways of seeing change that I never thought of. I mean, people like Alice Wong, who's become this, the oracle of the next generation of disability activism, and she's done a lot of fabulous things. I don't always agree with her, perhaps, but I, it's kind of great, her ability to reach people and shake up their way of thinking. There's the YouTube star, Shane Burka, who sometimes I think of as a younger version of me. Our disabilities are similar, although he's a lot wittier than. I wish I were as clever as he is. He's spreading a different kind of a message of inclusion and opportunity and equality. He sort of followed him for a while, but there's so many others. A lot of the folks I quote in my book who just kind of blow your mind. You read their blog posts or whatever, and it just sort of, I don't know, they're brilliant,
Say on social media, I've been following. We mentioned Melissa Blake earlier.
Yeah, she's also.
I love her.
Fabulous.
Yeah, she's very saucy. Andrew Pilrang is another person that I follow. His writing is actually very thought provoking, and it's something that I really enjoy. And just very recently, I don't mean to be political, but John Fetterman for
oh yeah,
and then his some of the decisions that he's had about having accessible the captioning in
it's fabulous,
all and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it just kind of puts
Senator Duckworth too. Yeah.
Tammy Duckworth.
Yeah.
She's another excellent representative.
I probably should shout out that for me, whatever disability role models I had once upon a time were kind of the usual suspects, and I've since learned from writing this book that there are a lot of folks I didn't know about, a lot of people of color that have, and maybe somewhat different background from mine, but wow, they've got again a lot of wisdom, a lot of righteousness, the intersectional issues of ableism and racism, or ableism and homophobia. All it's a big tent, disability, and there's so many folks in different areas who bring to light aspects outside of my frame of reference. But man, they're righteous to me, and I try to be as supportive as I can be.
That's a great answer. I do want to say that whether you consider yourself a role model or not, your writing and your ability to present, I think makes you a role model and as an author even. So just know that for some of us on the other side, we very much appreciate what you have done and what you are doing. So
well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, what is the next big push forward going to come from? What do you want to see from the next generation of disability advocates, Ben?
Yeah, good question. I think before I wrote this book, I had this suspicion, this fear that the younger generation, they were just resting on their laurels. My generation, the one before me even, had pushed through the ADA and all this stuff, and nobody cared anymore. Boy, was I wrong, And so I'm, the next progress, whatever, it's going to come from younger disabled folks who are going to, help us have these I hope help society understand these larger issues. As we said, not just a seat at a table, or at the table, but something better than a table. I don't know exactly what that will look like. I hope the progress that's been made, the awareness, for instance, I've belonging to kids in college identifying as disabled because of ADHD or dyslexia or whatever. I mean, the broad understanding of what's included in the disability umbrella, I think that's great. And I hope it isn't just a trend, a fad. I hope it continues and expands and grows. Mental health, for instance, might be the next way. I don't know. But, there's still got a lot to do out there. And I think these younger activists are gonna lead the way.
Well, I certainly.
At least I hope so.
Yeah, I'm with you. I will say with Special Olympics, they talk about their ambassadors as how important it is to recognize that it's not in the future that they are leading, that the time is now. And Nat, you hear that all the time. I know you hear that all the time.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it's all on you, kid.
Yeah. One other question, and we kind of covered this a little in different ways a little earlier, but are there any groups that you would call your circles that you either stay informed or find good sources for, like discussion and thought today? And here, really, maybe another way to say this is, have you read any good books recently, or are you active in any communities that you would recommend others to be involved in?
Yeah, we've named several people already that I do follow and try to engage with. I mean, I love some of the online group viewings, group discussions from the Longmore Institute in San Francisco, and DREDF, the Disability Rights Education Defense Fund. I hate to single anyone out. Gosh, you mentioned Melissa Blake. She has a book coming out that I look forward to. Kia Brown has had a couple of kids' books, I think, lately, but she's done some great stuff. They say there's so many. I hate to leave anyone out.
One of the projects that we're working on right now is building a little library, but the idea is to include kids' books that actually focus on disability, so that whoever's picking them up can. Oh, Nat, go ahead.
Thinking about doing my own children's book as well. So
Yeah, good.
writing my own children's book, and it's gonna be named after a song that one of our family friends who are based out of upstate New York actually made. It's called Stand. Their song is called Stand. My book is named after their song, Stand, and they actually made that song. That song is actually used all across the U.S. In special education classrooms. In my book, I want to aim towards anti-bullying.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That's why.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Those are all good things. But as far as conversations or with the podcast, I can share some of the hashtags that you've shared in your book as a means of sharing conversation. That might be one really easy way to try to introduce people to some of the different discussions that are taking place. We've got one question which I hope we've been able to kind of shape some thought on. Nat, what is our final question?
Ben, we always ask this question to everyone that comes onto our podcast, but what does inclusion mean to you?
What does inclusion mean to me? Well, let me think. Not leaving anyone out, full and easy access, and that, of course, is to everything.
Yeah.
Not just to the shopping mall, but to social engagement,
Yeah.
to money and sex and love and rock and roll and everything else. I guess that's, for me, the idea, if I can figure out how to say this clearly, is that we move away from the idea of a standard of what's normal or what's right or even what's correct, that we don't see the world that way, but instead understand the diversity.
That's very well said. And I think Sex, Love, and Rock and Roll needs to be the name of your fourth book.
Definitely agree with all that you have said, Ben.
Ben, honestly, it has been an absolute pleasure to spend a little over an hour with you talking.
Oh, well, thank you both. It's I'm honored to be with you. I've enjoyed our conversation.
This has been really good. I really appreciate that you took time with us today.
Oh yeah, no, thank you both. Really,
yeah.
Good interview, good questions, and to say I'm flattered to be part of this. Thank you.
We were super excited when you said that you would be willing to come on. So thank you. All right, Ben. Honestly, have a good rest of the day and a good week.
Thank you both.
Okay.
All right, take it easy.
Ben.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.